Hello and welcome to the second of a few videos that will teach you how to master the art of war in Total War: Three Kingdoms. Set during the tumultuous Three Kingdoms era, battles are a common occurrence, often pitting several thousand troops against each other. Finding yourself in command of these massive armies can often be overwhelming, so let's take a look at 8 keys to success on the battlefield. Deploy appropriately. Whether you're attacking or defending, and whether it's a siege battle or a battle on the open field, the first step involves deploying your troops. There are many factors to consider when laying out your initial formations. For one, if you can see the enemy's deployment, try to counter it with your own. Spears should face off against cavalry, swords against spears, and cavalry should try to avoid spears while trying to get behind enemy lines. Terrain is a major consideration as well. Can you hide your troops in trees to prepare an ambush? Or perhaps you can tuck behind a hill to hide from enemy lines of sight. Or is there a boulder or building or river that you can use to block the enemy from a certain flank? If you can't see enemy formations, spears are best placed on your flanks to counter any enemy flanking attempts using cavalry, and swords and axes can take on the center. Archers should be kept behind the front lines so they can fire from safety, and the same applies to trebuchet. Setting trebuchet on either flank to fire across the battlefield is a great way of increasing collateral damage, and one final thing to consider across the board is rank and file. By right-clicking and dragging when you have a unit selected, you can tell units how wide or deep you want them laid out. Shallow but wide units obviously cover more ground, but they are more easily broken through by a powerful charge. Archers are, in my opinion, best laid out in square formation and apart from each other. This ensures that the archers are able to easily rotate to aim at different targets without disrupting other units, and the distance between them ensures that one enemy cavalry unit can't charge them all at once. Units that are deployed narrow and deep will also survive for longer against enemy units, as fewer individuals are engaged at any given time. This also means a lower damage per second output, but if you're setting up a clever cavalry flanking maneuver or rear charge, the longevity is worth more than damage per second. The upcoming cavalry charge will bring the damage. One final thing to consider is guerrilla deployment. Some units and some warlord abilities allow units to deploy outside of regular deployment zones. Remember to use this to your advantage. Get cavalry behind or around the enemy early, sneak infantry into hiding spots otherwise out of reach, or surprise a range-heavy army by deploying a few paces away from them. The way you deploy your armies will have a direct impact on everything else that's about to happen on the battlefield. Use advanced formations. Various units in your armies will have access to different advanced unit formations that will help bolster their abilities in certain ways. Keep in mind, however, that these unit formations never come for free. Some will hinder mobility, others will reduce certain stats, and some will make a unit more vulnerable in some ways while protecting it against others. Make sure you keep an eye on these formations and use them as necessary. The difference their use makes is very clearly evident when done properly, and here are some use case examples. Loose formation is essential for when the enemy has many ranged units or has towers from which they'll snipe your most elite troops with great ease. Unfortunately, the loose formation doesn't hold well against incoming charges, so prepare to turn it off when the enemy gets close. Using the wedge formation on your cavalry is excellent for cutting through enemy lines and devastating their morale and numbers. It slows your cavalry down until they're in charge distance, however, so this makes them more susceptible to being intercepted or shot down by archers as they make their approach. The turtle formation allows your units to block incoming ranged shots while limiting their movement speed, a worthwhile sacrifice against range-heavy enemies. There are circles and hollow squares for absorbing or even reflecting incoming charge damage back onto the enemy, and then there are some more intriguing formations, such as that of the Azure Dragons, where they carry spears and ranged weapons, providing a spears front, archers back layout. Keep in mind that these formations take time to get into, and so you have to be very responsive to evolving situations. Don't expect your cavalry to magically get the advantage of the wedge formation just because you clicked it a second before they make impact, and don't expect your shield walls to form up in a split second when enemy cavalry is bounding towards them. These things take time. Keep an eye out for the enemy using these formations as well. When activated, a huge icon comes over top of the unit icon, letting you know what formation they're about to enter. Do not waste arrows against the high missile block chance of the turtle formation, do not charge blindly into a circle formation, and do not charge headlong into a shield wall. Focus on morale. There are two ways to defeat the enemy on the battlefield. The obvious option involves killing each and every one of them, but the faster option involves destroying their will to fight. When you select a unit, your own or otherwise, you'll find the unit's current morale here. Hovering over the bar will give you a list of all the current modifiers, positive and negative. Charging, for example, gives units a hefty bump in morale, while being charged from the sides or rear gives a direct reduction. Some units, meanwhile, have the unbreakable trait. This means that they will under no circumstances surrender or flee from the battlefield unless explicitly told to do so. Outside of these unbreakable units, every unit can be made to flee the battlefield with a little bit of effort. Consider all the negative modifiers that can stack: losing the current engagement, being charged from the flanks, being charged from the rear, seeing friends rout, being hit by or standing next to fire, standing next to a unit that invokes fear, and more. There are several individual modifiers, and if you pile them onto a unit all together, you will get them to waver, rout, and ultimately shatter. A wavering unit has their icon flashing, a routing unit throws a white flag where its icon once was and might come back to fight again, but a shattered unit with just a white flag over its head is making its way off the battlefield for good. Try finding the enemy units with the weakest morale to begin with and target them with morale damaging options, focusing damage, charging in from the flanks, hitting them with fire, or attacking them with frightening units. On the flip side, don't try to scare off unbreakable units and consider morale boosting abilities that will help prevent units from running off, whether it's a general's ability or that of nearby supporting units. Soften them from afar. Ranged units in Total War 3 Kingdoms are extremely potent when used correctly. They typically have great range, and when used en masse, they can absolutely devastate a unit to the point of giving up before lines even meet. This is especially true for units with lower morale who are more susceptible to surrendering. An important thing to keep in mind is that archers and crossbows fire actual arrows and bolts. This means that a clump of densely packed individuals or larger individuals, such as men on horseback, are easier to hit. This also means that units that are standing in loose formations are harder to hit, and units hiding behind obstructions, such as trees, are harder to hit as well. The most important step when it comes to using your ranged units is to pick the right target. Different units have different ranged block chances, a stat you can see here. Block chances are typically the result of a unit carrying shields, and certain advanced formations will modify block chances to make them better or worse. The medium spear guard's turtle formation, for example, greatly bolsters ranged block chances. These units with high ranged block chances are bad targets and a waste of ammunition, and should only be targeted if there are no other viable options. It's a good idea to focus on units that are dangerous to your army should lines meet. Eliminating enemy swordsmen when you have a spear-heavy army, for example, is a good call. As the enemy approaches, you may want to spread the damage among multiple units to weaken the enemy across the board, or you may want to focus on a particular area if you're trying to support a specific flank of yours that's weaker or needs the extra help. Either way, make sure you are focusing your attention. 4 full units of archers firing at one enemy unit at a time is faster and more efficient than a 1-to-1 ratio. Once lines finally meet, consider focusing down on enemy archers to remove them from the equation and protect your own troops from enemy range support. When it comes to trebuchet, having a pair of units on either flank of your formation firing to opposite sides of the enemy formation is a great way to make sure your shots have a higher chance of hitting something even if they land slightly off target. The flaming shot off a trebuchet has great explosive damage, but the regular shot is able to bounce off the ground and travel through multiple units. Use the former for clumps of units and the latter for lines. A strategist with a retinue of 4 archers and 2 trebuchet is likely to reduce any enemy force to a manageable size before lines clash, and if the enemy army is small enough, lines may never clash at all. Use fire. When you have a strategist in your army with the appropriate skills, your archers and trebuchet are able to use flaming shots on the battlefield. This isn't an option available to crossbows, so there is a bit of a balancing act to consider between the use of fire and the extra range and armor-piercing capabilities of the crossbow. Flaming shots are a little slower to shoot, and they're a little less accurate, but fire can do a variety of things to help you on the battlefield. For one, a unit hit with flaming shots of any kind will suffer from temporary morale damage. As was discussed earlier, morale damage should be a priority, and the burning tip of an arrow can often be the tipping point that gets even the most well-equipped of enemy troops to turn and run. Not only that, but flaming shots can set nearby foliage alight, and any unit near a fire is also going to suffer morale damage. Keep in mind, however, that your own units will suffer the same morale damage if they are near or shot at by fire, no matter who is shooting said fire into the area. Fire has another excellent property. It sets buildings on fire, and this is something you can really use to your advantage in siege battles. Not only can you set the regular buildings on fire, you can also set the defensive towers alight. All you need to do is unleash a couple of volleys of flaming shots onto the towers and wait until the fire damage indicator goes beyond 50%. After that, the fire damage will slowly intensify and set the tower ablaze at 100%, and then slowly cause regular damage until the tower falls. Archers are able to quickly set multiple towers alight this way, and with a bit of patience, all the towers that pose a threat will be destroyed, making it safe for your infantry and cavalry to move towards the holes your trebuchet have made. So, between scaring enemy troops and destroying enemy towers, fire has some excellent uses on the battlefield and should never be underestimated. Charge and countercharge. Charges on the battlefield take into account two things. The first is a combination of mass and speed, and the latter is any given unit's charge bonus. The combination of mass and speed is something to consider when picking targets. A heavier unit charging into a lighter unit will cause more damage on impact, and a unit will cause more impact damage the faster it's going at the time of the two units clashing. This is why lighter peasant or archer units are very quickly crushed under the charging force of even light cavalry. A horse is quite a bit heavier than a person after all. This is also why you should give your cavalry a bit of a runway to get up to charging speed. Start too close to the enemy and you'll arrive below top speed, reducing the efficiency of your charge. Keep this in mind especially during siege battles, as cavalry has to slow down when rounding a bend. Charge bonus is a numerical bonus to the amount of melee damage output, and it lasts about 10 seconds after impact. This is a key point of differentiation between shock and melee cavalry. The former has higher charge bonus stats on average, meaning they must be micromanaged for maximum potential. Send your cavalry charging into an enemy unit with a double right click, let them stay engaged for about 10 seconds at most, and then order them out of the engagement and into a new charge with another double right click. Rinse and repeat, and you'll see the true power of cavalry unleashed on the battlefield. You can even make some risky charges into spears as long as you attack from the sides and rears, and as long as the unit isn't stationary and braced for impact. Charging isn't just the domain of cavalry though. All units have a charge bonus, and when front lines are about to engage, you should charge into the enemy with your infantry as well. And if you're being attacked by the enemy, you should countercharge to gain the charge bonus even when on the defensive. Don't countercharge cavalry unless it's with your own cavalry, of course, but enemy infantry should be targets of countercharges to ensure that you get the benefits of the charge bonus just as your opponent does. A good charge can be absolutely devastating when done right. Do not underestimate the power of cavalry in this regard. Even ranged cavalry can get involved with a charge here and there to tip the balance in your favor. Just be sure to cycle in and out of combat to maximize efficiency. Brace for impact. You won't always want to countercharge the enemy. As mentioned previously, sending infantry charging into oncoming cavalry is, for example, not the right call. This isn't the only case when you're better off bracing for impact. Some generals, if leveled up properly, will give their retinue the ability to negate charge damage, and some units will be able to reflect charge damage or adopt an advanced formation that will allow them to do so. While the former is still worth countercharging with, the latter should always stand steady as a charge comes through from the front, as any damage they would have taken is reflected back onto the attacking unit. In order for this to happen, a unit must be braced. This simply happens after a unit has been stationary for a few seconds. A unit that is moving into formation or to a new destination as a charge comes through will not benefit from its charge reflecting capabilities and will instead take on the full amount of damage. So, get into position early with these troops, face the enemy, brace for impact, and hold steady. The results can be astonishing. Use your generals in combat. Whether playing in the more grounded Wreckers mode or the fantastical Romance mode, your Warlords are extremely powerful units on the battlefield, and their proper use can tilt even the most unfavorable odds. Every general falls under a different category, highlighting their particular strengths and weaknesses. Strategists and commanders, for example, should be kept back to support your troops rather than fight in melee. Champions are best used to target enemy warlords. Sentinels can be used to screen and hold enemy troops and warlords as well, while vanguards are excellent at engaging with numerous enemy troops. Warlords all have access to various abilities that are unlocked by leveling them up appropriately, and these abilities can offer a variety of buffs for your own troops or debuffs for enemy troops. Some abilities cause fear, others increase the rate of fire of nearby archers, and others still help in melee combat, while some are just damage-dealing abilities meant to be used offensively. Learn which of your warlords is suited for any given situation, and keep that in mind when it comes time to do battle. Warlords can also engage in duels in romance mode, but you should be very careful which challenges you take on. Losing a duel can be devastating, so be picky, and be sure to use your abilities during a duel to help your warlord in a tough situation. And finally, don't be afraid to take a few risks with your warlords either. They have a massive pool of health, and that gives them a fair bit of safety when taking on regular enemy units. So go ahead and let your strategists and commanders get in on the action. Let them get a couple of rear charges in after lines meet. It'll make quicker work of the enemy, and it allows your warlords to share in the glory. The battlefields of Total War 3 Kingdoms often feel chaotic, but in chaos there is opportunity. Learn how best to use your troops and warlords, and ensure you are always gaining the benefits they provide while stripping the enemy of the opportunity to do the same, because that's what being a great general is about.